Hello and welcome to Risk at Work, Risk Connect's educational web series. I'm Scott Fenstermaker. I'm the VP of Digital Marketing. Today we're talking about risk management with teeth, giving the risk function a voice in corporations. You know, many of the core functions that we think about when we think about risk management, when we think about risk assessments, or we think about control planning and so forth, in a very real sense, these things are the easy part of risk management. It's not necessarily risk management's role simply to plan for or suggest controls to an organization. It's risk management's role to make sure that the organization is controlling for risks. So fundamentally, risk management needs to have meaningful influence within an organization, and that takes an ecosystem, that takes circumstances being right, and that takes an expertise all its own. And we're going to talk about that today. First, a couple of points before we get started. Number one, if you have questions for our guest today, please put your questions into the questions field in your webinar software. If we do not answer the question as part of the discussion today, we will reach out to you directly with an answer to your question afterwards. Also, if you indicated that you would like CPE credit for attending today's webinar, please watch your inbox after we're done here today. We're going to send you a short 3-question quiz. You fill that out, send it back in, and we will reply to you with your CPE credit. My guest today is a many-time guest of Risk at Work. I'm thrilled to have her back. She's an internationally recognized author, speaker, writer, educator, advisor, just a Renaissance woman who has been an advisor on operational risk management to large financial institutions like, to name one, Lloyd's Banking Group. Her textbook, Operational Risk Management, Best Practices in the Financial Services Industry, and I've never been able to do this before, but I'm going to hold up my autographed copy just so that you can see it. I have an autographed copy. Do you guys have an autographed copy? Maybe you need to meet this speaker and pick up your own autographed copy. More recently, her article, Smaller Companies Must Embrace Risk Management, was published by the Harvard Business Review. I am always thrilled to have this speaker back. She's a wonderful friend. She's a great speaker, and she is very, very wise. Please welcome Ariane Chapelle. Ariane, how you doing?
Very well. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the generous introduction, as always. And for those of you listening, if you wanted an autographed copy, I'll be at the Risk Connect Europe conference and Connect in the US. So there you go. Amy will be happy that I mentioned the conferences.
Absolutely. Be sure to
And
sign
you
up
too.
for Connect Europe and Connect 2025. Meet Dr. Chapelle there. Pick up your own autographed copy. You will be glad that you did. Sign up now because the spaces are going fast. Anyway, Dr. Chapelle, let's talk about risk management. And I see that this slide is appropriate. We're talking about teeth here. So let's talk about risk management with teeth.
Risk management with teeth and with these introductory slides, which is my favorite animal. So there you go. There's a piece of trivia. And like you said in your intro, Scott, arguably one of the difficult aspects of risk management is to give it leverage, to give it authority. And I must give back to Caesar. The origin of this expression that comes from Philippa Gerling. I'll mention her in more detail later on in this presentation. Now, like always, three chapters. If I can progress my slides, there you go. 3 topic. 1, get close. If you can't get close, you can't bite, really. More in a governance perspective, how you can make risk a gateway and a mandatory gateway in an organization. And finally, document to evidence. So basically write what you're doing so that it stays. So first of all, get close. Now, like I mentioned, you can't bite if you're too far away. And this is this is one important element, and let's say starting soft, because besides the sort of semi-joke here, it's very important for risk managers to be influential, for them to be influential, to be close to the business. By close to the business, I mean respected and friendly. And just a little bit of history, if you allow me. You've mentioned my advisory role, but in my early days of operational risk, when I started in 2000, 2001, operational risk management at ING Group. And it was pretty much the day one of operational risk management in the banking sector in Europe. And my role, coming from internal audit, was, and I was alone part-time for a scope of 11,000 people, employees in 5 different countries. I really had to leverage on the business and to convince and to work the human relationship and the yeah, the personal aspects of risk management. And so this is a topic that is absolutely close to my heart. It's a topic I paid attention for the last 20, nearly 25 years, actually. And in order to get close, you need to get friendly, but you need to be respected. And in order to be respected is really to demonstrate competence on 2 elements. On the business, you need to understand the business, and you need to understand risk management. And for those of you who have listened to me before, and the different topics we covered on governance and the role of the risk function, you heard me saying that the risk function is very much the role of an advisor in the methodology of risk. And I know you will want to discuss this, but let me first explain what I say by that. And again, in 3 times 3, you want, as a risk manager, to be strong on your methodology. So to be really as good as you can in the technicalities of risk management. And I still regret that risk management, especially non-financial risk management, is not taught enough at universities. It's improving, but it's still a work in progress. And of course, I've spent the last 20 years teaching on operational risk, and I know that the vacuum is still significant. And so a sound methodology is around an integrated framework, around proper risk management tools, and being proportionate, meaning having, and you heard me talking about that as well, a big focus for big risks, and be able to let go what are the small elements. And linked to that, it's not only being a specialist for the business itself, but on the risk management itself, but really understand the typical risk that are faced by the industry and the organization and the activity you are facing. And I'll give you one small example. When I do risk management or discuss risk management in a bank or in asset management, it's very, very easy because, it's very easy to me because I know these activities quite well and I know which their risks are. When I do risk appetite workshops in hospitals, for instance, this is a content of risk I don't know much at all. So I can talk about the methodology externally, but not really for the business itself. But we can talk more about that. And finally, the good risk managers I find are, and organizations that are good at risk management are organizations that thrive for continuous improvement. It is an evolving world, and the technicalities and the technology we're talking about Risk Connect as well. The technologies of risk management are evolving. There are new risks emerging, and we talked in previous Risk at Works webinars on AI and alike, and that also leads to an adjustment. So I would say credible risk managers are those who encompass these characteristics.
Let's talk about these for a second, because this is the crux of your first section, and it's very, very important to, I think, know what these things look like. So let's take strong and sound methodology first. I'm sort of picturing. So first of all, I think what you're saying is that that's an argument from credibility on operating from best practices, right? Sort of an ethos argument. This is what strong companies do in their risk management departments. Therefore, we should treat it as credible. Do you ever run into a situation where risk departments might very easily say, yeah, we've got the same practices that everybody else has. We do risk assessments. We keep track of risk profiles. We assess for inherent risk and residual risk, and then we report that. That's what people do. So is there a difference maybe between strong and sound methodology and the methodology that everybody thinks is strong and sound that they're doing? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yes. Now the package is the same. So
Okay.
everybody has an RCSA, a risk and a probability and impact matrix, a heat map, and control testing.
Mm-hmm.
So the tool is the same, but it's really how you use it to the characteristics of your firms and to stabilize and improve the performance of your particular firm. So strong first is, strong is, first of all, in my mind, or what I meant when I explained that is to be comfortable with your concept. And maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
a bit biased because being a consultant, I see by default people and risk managers who struggle
Mm-hmm.
sometimes with their own methodology. Or sometimes because they're too shy. And so I've seen both. So one is being really sure and convinced of what you're doing, because it's hard to convey conviction. It's hard to be convincing if you're not convinced yourself. So
Sure.
that's the strong. Sound is also linked to, besides being conceptually correct, is linked to disproportionate actions or to this adaptability of the firm. So a control can be very, very important in a given organization because, linking to the second point of the business, the stakes are really high. It's a key control. I'm thinking of a callback in an asset management company. I was in Switzerland not too long ago, for a firm that lost a significant amount of money because they've been victim of an external fraud. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because a typical spam email, they didn't check that the client who was supposedly wiring the money wasn't the client, because they didn't do a callback. They didn't call back the client
Got
and
it.
identify this potential theft of information. Why? Because it was a junior person, and the person in charge typically was away. The very typical example. But these are the sorts of key controls that you need to know are very important, and you absolutely enforce in some particular cases. I guess it's the difference
Mm-hmm.
between this tick boxing, you have a
Yeah.
rule and you apply because everybody applies it, or you apply at least a smaller set of rules, but you know that the reasons are there, and therefore you credibly explain why this needs to be done. And that's what I mean also by proportionate action, is asking less. And we talked about that when we talked about positive risk management in previous webinars. You ask less, but you're stronger with what you ask, so that
Yes.
there's not this risk management fatigue about everything and anything.
I see. And I liked what you put together at the very beginning of your answer when you talked about people either struggling with the methodology or being too shy. That's an important relationship, because I think you're appealing to a confidence through competence type of idea, where you can have more influence purely through comfortability with your own model, comfortability with the practices, comfortability with the proactivity of it, such that you just come across more confidently, and that may help overcome the your shyness that you're talking about, or maybe a little trepidation, hesitation kind of idea. I
Yes,
also, oh, please, yes.
sorry. And this confidence comes not only by understanding the risk management methodology, but understanding the business you're talking to. And a lot
Mm,
of organizations are have these risk managers who are the typical counterparty of different business lines. And the idea is because when you are the privileged counterparty for the risk sections on a certain activity, you're supposed to know the people in these activities, the processes, where the strong points are, where the weak points are, and what's at stakes. And that's what I mean with this slide. So that's why you really need competence on two things: the concept of the business, but also what's happening in the business, so you can establish rapport and being taken not only seriously, but as a trusted sounding board, let's say.
So as I hear you saying that, I want to make sure make sure that I correctly understand what you're saying. When we talk about business knowledge, there's a couple of ways that we could talk about it. When you talked about it earlier, you talked about more or less industry knowledge, right? You were comfortable in financial services, not so much in healthcare and so forth. But there's another level to business knowledge, which is the knowledge of this business, right? The idiosyncrasies here, which allow you to know that if this senior person, if the senior authorizing party is for whatever reason absent, that the person taking over for them is so junior that they are a fraud risk, right? That kind of idea of where the pressure points are in a particular organization, where the points of influence are. Do I have you right?
Yes, no, absolutely. So there's two levels of knowledge. There's what are the typical key risks, key controls in a given industry or sub-industry. And there's also what are the strengths and weaknesses of this particular organization, also because of culture. And in previous webinars, we talked about a culture, I mean organizational culture and way of working. In previous webinars, I talked about the bow tie analysis and previous conferences. And when you do a root cause analysis of several different incidents in a given organization, you see patterns of failures and patterns of success. And patterns of failures will highlight where the organization is typically weak at versus good at. And these are the idiosyncrasies you're referring to. And so as a risk manager, you will look at fixing the weak points and not asking to know everything about anything, because the elements you're good at already, you get let go. You can relax your attention. They're fine.
I see. Good. Let's please continue on. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Now, in terms of the people and the relationship, and this is part of what I've written about also under the invisible framework. And the invisible framework is really not to push the jargon of risk management to the business necessarily, but really adapt as a risk manager, adapt to the business, adapt to their way of communicating, adapting to how they label their activities. And as we know, risk management exists everywhere, and risk management was certainly pre-existing the risk management function. You know, we haven't waited for a label of risk manager to manage our risks in organization. So there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of controls, there's a lot of risk identification, risk assessments that take place in the business, but without saying its name. And that's what I mean by recycling the activities in the risk framework, is really identifying what it is that the business is doing that is actually risk management, but without them realizing it is, so you can take on board these practice and put that in your framework. The second aspect, which is, let's say, one step further than proportionality, is also recognizing that risk management is costly, and taking risk brings upside and not only downside. So we're not talking about killing risk, but we're talking about recognizing the benefits of taking risk and limiting the downside, but allow as much upside as possible. And again, we talked about that in more detail when we talked about positive risk management. And finally, and linked to all the discussions we had on competence, you want your risk functions to provide support and helping the business solving some of their issues when it comes to assessing risk. And again, whether it's in the second line or in the first line, or more commonly in the first line, some people are intuitive risk managers and some people are not. And so as a risk manager, you're supposed to have this very intuitive to you, and it's also your role to assist the business in helping with these trade-offs, upside and downside. Okay. And finally, the best part of the job, I think, is to make friends or to build a community. And I love this picture. We raised the name, but it's in a large international organization. You might recognize I'm fairly younger on that picture, and next to me is the CRO of this group. And so we were in Malaysia there, and all this group is a group of 40-something risk champion, and we were at the end of a 4-day training. And these people, having spent 4 days together doing group work, really have built a sense of community of risk champions to exchange practices across the different parts of the business. And this is something I discuss regularly when I do trainings of risk champions, so the so-called 1.5 in the business, and say, well, often you're alone in your functions. You're the one risk champion in a department talking to the risk function, and it can be a lonely job. But there's actually one of you in all the departments or the divisions, and it's really beneficial to meet, I would say, at least quarterly, or more often if you can, to really share your practice. And that's very specific to a feature of non-financial risk, is that people tend to keep their card close to their chest, not to share so much stories about risk incidents outside of the organization. So at least within the organizations, try to benefit from exchanges across people as much as possible. And as a risk manager, really build a close relationship between the first line and the second line. So that's the nice aspect of risk management. Okay.
Can I ask
Yes.
a quick question on I love this idea of the fact that the second line, risk management, is supposed to provide some kind of support to the first line. Normally we think about, risk managers saying, I need this data, right? Can you do these extra processes for me so I can get my data, right? It's that kind of a one-way street. What does it look like when the second line is doing a good job and supporting the first line? What's an example of how the second line can provide meaningful support in the way that you suggest?
Well, about the data, the first thing is to feedback on the data. And I'll share an analogy I probably have shared in other conference, but a friend of mine in a very mature company told me years ago, she said, if you ask people the data without sending back your analysis, it's like asking people to type on a keyboard without a screen. Of course, you will have typos, and of course, people will be discouraged to type. It's like filling in a survey and never get the results of a survey.
Sure.
What's the incentive? And so one element is at least, okay, you give me your data, but I'll send you back what your loss income ratio is, what are the type of your patterns of failures or types of top risks or causes for your top losses is compared to all the other departments or compared to all the similar departments. When I was at ING, I had tallies like this on operational risk per sales figures across the different commercial entities. That's what they wanted. And it really motivates people to send data for that. Provide support can be provide support in designing action plans or providing, systematic action plans that will fix everybody's issues at one rather than one per one. So there's lots of possible examples.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay. The second aspect, which is a lot more strict, I would say, is the rather than the soft approach, is more the authoritarian approach. And that's on the need for a CEO support. So we know that a CEO and a senior executive, and definitely the board, will be accountable if something blows up in the business. It doesn't matter if it's 5 lines down the line. And let me remind you the example of Jérôme Kerviel. That dates back, but it's a public example, who almost exploded Société Générale by losing 5 billion. Everybody up the food chain, and that was like, what, 6, 7 layers of management. I need to check exactly. They all got thanked and had to leave the business because one guy they never heard of almost sank the bank. And so given these accountability, it is their responsibility as well to make sure they have, so to seek and receive the transparent and comprehensive information on all risk issues. It means that the risk committee is not trying to go through it unnoticed, but really explain for each head of the business, each business line manager or business units responsible to really be, again, comprehensive and competent in explaining what are the risks they face and what they're doing about it. And actually, market surveys have shown that the companies that come across the best in terms of risk communications are companies that are perceived as both transparent about the risk they face and competent in addressing them. And that's for market communication as a whole, but the same goes internally for the business. And a risk-aware senior management will provide support to the risk function. So when a risk function says something, it's actually backed by management, the same way it provides support to internal audit, risk communication, that's just what I explained, and also sanction any risk negligent behavior. Scott, you like Nassim Taleb, and one of the first.
The bank example you have, I think, is from Anti-Fragile, or was featured in Anti-Fragile, yeah.
Oh, yeah, but even way before that, in Fooled by Randomness, one of the first sentence is the quality of the risk, the quality of the decision or the risk level taken in a decision shouldn't be judged by the outcome, but should be judged by the level of risk you took. And
sure.
The day-to-day example is that if your kid crosses the street without looking and is alive on the other side, you're not going to congratulate him to pull it off, okay? Quite the opposite. And so it's the same when Kweku Adoboli made 20 million profit on an arbitrage desk. He said the answer he had was, you pulled it off this way this time, but don't do it again, but wasn't fired, even though 20 million on an arbitrage desk is just a crazy amount of money. And because he felt like he could keep going, the later down the line, the bank lost $2 billion. So punishing any risk negligent behavior is that regardless of the outcome, if the risk taken was too large, that's not going to fly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so linked to that, the support of CEOs is the support about risk culture. Tone at the top, we talked about tone at the top. I like to tweak it a little bit into done at the top. Done at the top is really where senior management lead by example. So whether it's supporting, providing support to the risk function, punishing risk negligent behavior, these are what I refer to as done at the top. Tune in the middle is really around focusing on what people need to do in terms of risk management rather than only what the objective is. We know that the objective is to optimize risk management and to stabilize performance. But these are, again, it's the what, it's not the how. And if you want a risk function to be effective, it's also useful, especially from the second line to the first line, to the middle management, to explain to them exactly how to do it. And that's the importance of training of all the lines, and the regulator in the financial services is very clear on that. And not to try to only push on the motivation aspect without exactly telling people how to do it and giving them the tool, and GRC tools would be one of them. And finally, the part of the process is, again, saying, and on the same line as the done at the top, is that action speaks louder than words. And so you can say that you have no appetite for internal fraud, or you can have very good segregations of duties control. You can say that you have very little appetite for information security, or you can have very strong encryption rules, etc., etc. You can design your processes so that you minimize human errors, etc. So what an organization does, even without any poster on the wall, will be quite explicit in terms of how it does risk management. And so going back to the core topic of us today, how do you make risk management effective? Well, basically, you move away from the posters on the wall and you implement concrete actions in the processes.
I actually recognize that pyramid myself, just from my experience at Risk Connect. For example, have absolute zero risk appetite for anything happening to customer data, right? And so we have very strict levels of processes and training and so forth as to how customer data works. And so I can recognize all of these, right? If anybody's looking for an example of this, the processes of treating customer data securely and only accessing it under certain conditions, and refraining from downloading anything where it shouldn't be. That's all kind of habit, right? The habits of the corporation. In the middle, we have all kinds of certifications and training. Every year we have to recertify for a bunch of different things. And so there's a cultural aspect, there's behaviors that are expected, that are explained. And our leadership absolutely takes part of these things and demonstrates these things by their own conduct. So this hits me
Yes,
particularly
and
saliently.
this example illustrates very much what we've discussed in previous webinars on risk appetite and KRIs. So it's not enough to say I have minimal appetite for loss of customer data or compromission
Sure.
of customer data, but you evidence this appetite through key controls, measures, trainings, and then monitoring metrics.
Right, or else it didn't happen.
Yeah, or it's
When you were
not
talking
credible.
about CEO support or leadership support, is it can risk management be effective with anything less than full-throated executive leadership support? You must have encountered companies in your career as an advisor. You must have encountered companies with leadership that was ambivalent to risk management. Is it possible for the risk managers themselves to be effective even if they don't have the significant backing from the CEO and the leadership team that one would hope for?
It's a big struggle.
Yeah.
Definitely, the life is much easier when, as a risk manager, let me specify.
Yeah.
As a risk manager, your life is much easier when you have CEO support. Absolutely. How do you go around it? Again, not easy. What I would do, and without taking too long on this, but first of all, I try to gain it by other speech than colors. So
Mm.
basically, it's about quantifying the impacts, and I think people and CEOs or senior manager will listen with potential to dollar amount of potential loss rather than a red, amber, green report. And that reminds me of a comment that a senior management said in a risk committee that has been reported to me, is like, well, are we taking decisions here or are we looking at pictures? And so when you have a too colorful risk management report that is not as matter of fact or quantified, it's very important. And again, those listening to me for a long time know that I'm a huge advocate of quantifying the so-called and very ill-named non-financial impacts, because
Right.
reputation damage, and I spoke at the Connect 2024, and that is quantifiable, and everything with a little bit of imagination or creativity, but rational creativity would be quantifiable. So the first aspect is try to demonstrate the importance. One also small anecdote on that, on a risk officer, she was in charge of continuity of third parties, and she was desperate that no one was listening to the importance of the continuity of the third party she was managing. And I said, well, look, simulate a disruption with, tell audit and, warn the number of people to be warned, don't lose your job over this. It was in the US. But simulate disruptions to raise awareness, because nothing raises awareness more than strong incidents. And just one more anecdote on that.
Please.
One example on that, it was in it was in Europe. I won't be more specific than that, but it was a fast fintech firm, credit allocation fintech firm, fastly growing. And they call me and they say, oh, our senior management are not listening. You should come and raise awareness. I was like, okay. And I haven't heard from them. And 3 months later, I have them back on the phone. They contact me again. I said, well, do you want me to come and raise awareness to the senior management? They said, no, it's not necessary. I was like, what happened? It was like, well, basically, we used a substandard legal opinion in country X, and we lost our license. So risk managers are well aware of the potential damage of operational risk. So that was done.
The risk is the awareness is there, right? The awareness is raised for you. Yes, exactly.
Exactly. So once you have an accident, so you won't be just as cynical, although some have discussed that, won't be as cynical as let things drop, but simulate things dropping and quantify. So one, quantifying impact based, simulating things dropping, or and when you have incidents, because you have the out of sight, out of mind element, when you have incidents, really make sure that they shared, and these are important signs of risk culture. So be vocal on that. And the fourth element to have is to seek localized support, because even if the CEO, imagine, is not bothered about risk management, and I have examples like that, you have pockets of the business that are, and I have actually more than one examples of these situations.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
But when you do have some governance supporting risk management, there's one element that is quite widespread now, and I like the acronym NIRAP for New Initiative Risk Approval Process, a lot better than the ugly one NPAP, which is New Product Approval Process. That sounds terrible, very widespread in the UK. But so let's go for the Canadian one, or at least the first one I encountered it was in Canada.
Rob will thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. New Initiative Risk Approval Process. So that's basically when you have the risk management has a veto right, or at least an escalation right to they have a voice in the go no go of any sort of strategic project or project of change initiative, as you can see here, under certain circumstances from a risk perspective. Mm-hmm. That's very commonplace in the financial services industry. In other industries, I'm talking to, and I know that when senior managers go one step ahead, even though some others do, is to give the risk function or the head of risk a capacity to review all the policy changes with almost an automated approval when the policies do not change the risk environment. But when a change in policy might consider, and it's up to the head of risk to judge whether or not these changes might influence the risk exposure or the risk profile of the organization, then the head of risk will escalate that to the general risk committee where senior management sits. And so that really puts risk management or the risk function as a triage function of what's acceptable versus what needs to be further developed. Okay.
Thank you.
And then on the note, on it's not only me saying that, and especially when I talk about, being friends and all that, there is an oversight and challenge role of the risk function. So this is a representation and an authorized reproduction of the three lines model of the Institute of Internal Auditor. When they place, if you go on the lower sides of the slides here, they place the second line role under management authority, and internal audit is separate as an independent assurance. We know that. But I like the how they label the role of the second line. Expertise, support. So that's what these were my point in the first element of the talk. Monitoring and challenge, which is more the second part of this presentation, on risk-related matters. So it's not on business matters, but it's on risk-related matters. So for instance, if you are in the business and you decide to launch a product or externalize the service to a third party, I'm not as a risk function, and if I'm the risk function, I'm not there to judge whether your product will be commercially successful, or I'm not there to judge whether the third party, if the right one is the best one to provide the service. I'm there to judge whether you stress test your business plan, first of all, and is your third party has the security measure, whether it's about data protection, talking about customer data, continuity, enforceability of the contracts or the copyrights or whatever legal elements, etc. So these are the risk-related matters. And so you keep the authority separate, the business and the strategy in the first line, and the risk-related matters, oversight and challenge in the second line. But again, clear role and responsibilities is a very important element of risk management with teeth. Okay. And so we here in the third element of the talk with the picture of a movie that some of you might recognize. It's Margin Call, and here you have Stanley Tucci, who's plays the character of Eric Dale, who's a senior risk officer and this unnamed bank in D0 or D-1 of the great financial crisis. And he's been let go, in apologies from Europe, in a very American way, when they say thank you, you take the elevator down and your phone is off. And just before the door, and I encourage you to watch it again for those of you who are interested in those stuff. I think it's a fascinating movie. I won't say more, but the scene that stuck with me, and I'll explain that more professionally in a second, or in a more professional context in a second. But his junior analyst says thank you, and Eric Dale pulls out a USB stick and he says, look, I've been working on something, have a look and see what you can make of it, and be careful. And then we see that, and that's the portfolio balance, and then the fund starts. But what stuck with me is that this guy who's been let go, and then the guy scrambles like crazy to get him back. And there are some real life as this, is that if you document as a risk officer what you're working on, it can really save you. Now, first of all, as a day-to-day measure, for the regulated sector listening, and definitely the financial services industry, this is a quote from my friend Andrew Sheen, who used to be at the Basel Committee, and then at the PRA, the FSA, and then the PRA in the UK, and then regulatory affair of largest bank. The quote for the regulator is the absence of evidence is evidence of absence, which is, if you don't document it from a regulatory perspective, if you can't prove it exists, we consider it doesn't. Okay. So when you have to evidence your risk management actions for the regulator, you definitely have to document it. But I would say as well, as a risk manager, whether it's a senior risk officer or a CRO, if you think you have trouble, there's trouble in the organization, I can only encourage you to document it, because when things go back bad, just like in margin call, that's the thing that will save you, at least from a personal perspective. And again, if you allow me to share a personal example, I was in contact with a bank that wasn't doing greatly, let's say, and a small entity, and the CRO was screaming that, you know, it wasn't good and things were dangerous. And I said, you have to document everything, because they say they're not listening to me. I said, make a report and document what you're doing. And I did help him, and we've put this report together. And then 2 years later, when this bank was taken over, gone under, no matter what, this person had found other job in other places. And he said, your report saved me. So the fact that he had evidenced everything he saw meant that he wasn't washed out with the rest of the firm. So both at professional level and at personal level, as a risk manager, I would encourage you to document what you're doing. And so that leads to my dear friend and peer and predecessor in this, both in publishing at Wiley Finance series on operational risk management, and writing the guidance of GARP. She did it all 10 years before, 7 years before I did, and she's been CRO of a number of banks, living now the Chateau life in France. End of the parenthesis. Philippa Gerling. That's the first time I heard her in a conference, when she was talking about her present as a risk officer in a committee where senior management basically seemed to not pay too much attention to what she was saying. And she said, what do you want me to put in the minute of this committee, that you heard about the risk issues I raised and you decide to do nothing? Just clarifying, do you want me to put this in the minutes? And all the guys around the table were, no, actually, let's put a working group together and let's go with it. Thank you very much. And so that's where that's the anecdote, risk management with teeth, that she used many years ago, and that, you know, basically triggered the title of this talk. And so just beyond the anecdote, when you have risk committees, document the issues, document the decision, designate an action plan owner, so the whole governance structure around it, deadlines, and a follow-up of the deadlines. And if nothing has decided, so that's the documentation of non-action as well.
So you're documenting of things like action and non-action, and in such a specific context as board minutes or risk committee minutes, brings to mind a question. So how do you think about risk-related documentation in different jurisdictions around the world, which may or may not be more litigious, and which may seek through subpoena to discover such documents, such evidence that you had thought or not thought about risks? I'm thinking about one country, of course, not to name names, but I'm pretty familiar with this country. And this country makes it challenging to talk about risk-related procedures in public for these kinds of reasons. So I'm curious to get your impressions on that.
Yes. So I'm walking on eggshells a little bit, because what if I'm subpoenaed?
Right.
No, it's definitely a factor. And again, let me first respond with an anecdote of a country, another unnamed country I know better, in a similar set of circumstances, and it's a bank I was working for at a time, and I said, "Oh, there's these issues. Let's talk about it in risk committee." And my boss said, "No, let's talk about it before the committee." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, well, the minutes of the risk committee go to the regulator, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
want the regulator to know, which is a terrible perverse effect. Um, two elements of, and the legal issues, I'll get to that in a minute, but two perverse effect on that. One, I think the regulator, and here we're talking about the regulator of the financial services, has unintended consequences by demanding this over transparency.
Sure.
And it shuts down its own objectives. That's point number one. So yes, there is a sort of a justifiable element for it, sort of. However, European regulator, UK, EU, on all the ones I discussed with, at least, are very keen. They're very keen to know. What they want to know is that a firm is aware of their risks. And I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of this talk, is you need to come across as aware of your risks and able to address them, not about not having risks. And so if I had to choose between the two evils, if I was the chief risk officer of that particular bank, I would say transparency is the best policy, and you need to at least show, but you don't have to put in, don't have to call the regulator for everything, but you put it in the minutes, and if there's an audit, well, you'll show it. Now, the legal risks you're referring to is a difficult one, and I don't have the legal competence of the unnamed country you mentioned to answer that with any sort of authority. All I can
Granted.
say is I heard in that particular unnamed country, I heard, it's not the first time I hear this dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
I should say, and so and so it needs, yeah, it needs to be addressed. Yes. Sorry, I can't be more
Nope,
specific than
that's
that.
yeah, it's a thing. It needs to
But
be
I
addressed.
take
That's
the
totally
point. I
true.
take the point. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Um, all right. So I think we are now on at the takeaways and more question, Scott, in if you like. So three takeaways. First of all, be competent as much as possible as a risk manager in terms of concepts and tools, and knowledgeable in the business you have to deal with, and that will establish your relationship with the business. Second, seek executive support as much as you can. If you don't have it, evidence it through actual losses from the events that have happened, quantifiable losses or quantifiable risks, not so-called non-financial risks, and take advantage of strong governance with the roles and responsibilities of risk as a gateway, but also in the documentation, scripta manent. My dad, coming from a lawyer's family, keep repeating that to me. It means writing remains. So what you put in writing, whether it's good or poor practices, with the caveat and the dilemma we mentioned. On that note, Scott, over to you.
Yes, we're a very highbrow presentation here at Risk at Work, and so we cannot let one go by without having some kind of Latin phrase in the presentation media. It's very important, right, to establish our highbrow credentials. So we have about 6 or 7 minutes remaining, and so I think I just kind of want to explore one question in that time, which is, with all of the things that you've said, and you must have many examples of this in your head, but where do you think organizations struggle most with having risk management with teeth? Where do you think that they, generally speaking, need to place more attention, whether they know it or not?
Well, the first answer that comes to mind, and sorry if it's not fully satisfactory and very commonplace, is that it depends.
Of course.
But I would say it depends on the organizations. And again, being an advisor, people who are calling me are people who struggle. So I've seen all sorts of struggles. I've seen organizations that, with the best intention, haven't built enough where point number one is the weakest. Not so much in terms of competency of the concept, But more often, within point number one, thing that depend less is more the human report. The fact that the risk function confined itself to these challenge and oversight before support and advice, because they think they tend to confuse their role with internal audit, or they think
Sure.
they need to oversight and challenge at first, and so that builds this antagonistic relation, rather than co-creation first and collaborations of risk management with the first line. Very often the first line says to me, in those struggling organizations on this particular aspect, they say risk management is done to us rather than with us.
With us. Yeah, sure.
So in those organizations, either I tell them, well, sit down with the business and, go have a beer after sometimes they're like, I don't say that I say, go drink with them. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm not joking, actually.
I'm not.
So, you can't say that in every country, of course, but you see what
You
I
could
mean.
say that in mine that shall remain nameless, but yes, you certainly can.
In Belgium or
Yes.
France, you can certainly say that.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect, but more concretely, that can be also communities of risk champions, and that goes to the question of relates to the picture I showed you. Definitely, I've seen organizations where either the CEO doesn't care or senior management doesn't care. Not always, I've seen a whole spectrum. And in that case, my answer would be evidence risk management. In a sense, again, to generalize, if I have to generalize the weak point, I say not enough development of the human aspect of risk management, which is sad because that arguably is the funniest one, the most agreeable one, enjoyable one. So that's one element. The second one is not so much the weak support of senior executive, but a weak ability, or the shyness, or whatever it is, the lack of quantification of the monetary impact, direct and indirect, of operational risk events, and the lack of evidencing or resurfacing, shall I say, of incidents. Incidents are, have a tendency to be slid under the carpet, so no one sees them, or no one makes the sum of, this year we've lost that much. Are we happy with this or not? So that's on the second point. And on the third point, again, everybody hates writing. Maybe ChatGPT will change that a little bit. It has. Doesn't help you too much probably with the minutes of a risk committee. So documentation tends to be, again, in private sector, the poor parent. I wouldn't say, I work as well, as in development banks and in the public sector. That's not the poor parents. You have tons and tons of documentation. So that's not so much the case. But I'm thinking small to mid-cap organizations. I have lots of examples in mind of firms that do really good risk management, but upon intuition, the culture is good.
Sure.
Senior management, it's a family business, or it's an incumbent business for 10, 15 years, and they're doing things well, but it's so intuitive to them that they don't think about documenting.
Sure.
And from a risk management quality perspective, it's better that way than having, piles of documentations and no real intuition.
Nobody does anything. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, the ideal is to have both.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, as all your conversations are fascinating, Ariane. I really appreciate you being here today. Really appreciate you sharing this with us. This is incredibly valuable material, arguably the most valuable in terms of having some sort of efficacy with everything that we're doing as risk managers. So I want to thank you very much for sharing this with us. I want to thank everybody who took some time out of their day to join us today. And please join us again for our next installment of Risk at Work. Take care.